Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamakyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagara Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Satvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitanscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vandavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarabhyascha Kapasindubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Namo Namo Aniruddhaya Hrishikeshendriyatmane Namaha Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nipratatmane Swarga Pavarga Dvaraya Nityam Suchi Sade Namaha Namah Hiranyaviryaya Chaturotraya Tantave. Okay. So, I was given this verse. I guess the place marker is exactly where it is supposed to begin, I believe, right? Text 16. Or text 17. I was told it is chapter 16 verse, or are we in 17? Do we know which one? Anybody? 16, yeah, that's what I remember. So what is that, 16? 17, 16?
Yes, 117.
Okay. Okay, I was told 16, 17, so there was a mix-up, but that's alright. Perfect. Rajnyo hi paramo dharmaha swadharma sthanupalanam shasato nyanyata shastram anapadi utpataniha. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Please repeat after me. The supreme duty of the ruling king is to give all protection to law-abiding persons and to chastise those who stray from the ordinances of the scriptures in ordinary times when there is no emergency. Purport. In the scriptures, there is mention of apad dharma or occupational duty at times of extraordinary happenings. It is said that sometimes the great sage Vishwamitra had to live on the flesh of dogs in some extraordinary dangerous position. In cases of emergency, one may be allowed to live on the flesh of animals of all description, but that does not mean that there should be regular slaughterhouses to feed the animal eaters, and that this system should be encouraged by the state. No one should try to live on flesh in ordinary times simply for the sake of the palate. If anyone does so, the king or the executive head should punish him for gross enjoyment. There are regular scriptural injunctions for different persons engaged in different occupational duties, and one who follows them is called a swadharmastha, or faithful in one's prescribed duties. In the Bhagavad Gita, 1848, it is advised that one should not give up his occupational prescribed duties, even if they are not always flawless. Such swadharma might be violated in case of emergency, if one is forced by circumstances, but they cannot be violated in ordinary times. The state executive head is to see that such swadharma is not changed by the follower, whatever it may be, and he should give all protection to the follower of swadharma. The violator is subject to punishment in terms of the Shastra, and the duty of the king is to see that everyone strictly follows his occupational duty as prescribed in the scripture. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so what we would want to do today is not so much focus on the subject matter of the verse, but to have a generalization of the thrust of scripture. What is scripture trying to say, and what is the context in which it has been said? Because the context is very important, even if you are listening to classes on a daily basis, to always contextualize them and contextualize a certain purport, a certain verse in a certain manner is very important, because otherwise we would lose perspective. We could get lost in the details, or there may not be consistent connections when we are trying to understand scripture. Now, the most important thing that you would want to understand is that there is very significant, the great significance of both the Srimad Bhavatam and the Bhagavad Gita is that both were spoken to kings. They were not spoken to ascetics who are living in the caves. They were not spoken to renunciates. They were spoken to kings. Bhagavad Gita was spoken to Arjuna, and then later on Srimad Bhavatam, the whole narrative of Srimad Bhavatam was in the context of instructions being received by Parikshit Maharaj so that it could be passed on to us. In other words, it was contextual, that it was a ruler who was receiving instructions. Okay, it's very important for us to understand the context. Now, let's understand that the Bhagavad Gita ends and the Srimad Bhavatam begins, because the Srimad Bhavatam particularly begins with the protection given to Parikshit Maharaj by Krishna, and then the questions and so on and so forth which range are starting from right there. The sages are beginning from how did Parikshit Maharaj ever come into the circumstances of listening to this. Now, why is it that the Bhagavad Gita is addressing questions to kings? Why is it that the Bhagavatam is also speaking to a king? This is a matter of great consideration. Why is it considered? Why is it important? It's because one has to understand karma. If we understand the nature of karma, then we would understand why Krishna spoke to Arjuna. Why wasn't it spoken to a sage? You see? Why couldn't Krishna have simply spoken to Srila Vyasadeva? And Srila Vyasadeva could have written, there could have been many contexts in which this whole narrative could have come about. But what was the necessity for Krishna to choose the circumstances of a battleground, right? The circumstances of a battleground are very complex. And the circumstances of a battleground are complex enough where people do not come into the battlefield with confusion. They come in with clear objectives of wanting to achieve certain ends. Okay? There's no confusion. You don't go to the battlefield and start worrying about your laundry. You don't. You don't really worry about your mortgage when you're on the battlefield. Any soldier who goes to the battlefield is worried about either inflicting death upon the enemy or himself being killed. It's one of the two outcomes which is going to come out. At the end of the day, the person is going to return safe, or they are going to succumb to the affliction of wounds of the enemy. Now, the other context that we have to understand is karma itself. Karma operates on two levels. The first level of karma that operates is, it operates in the environment. What is the environment one is exposed to? What is the environment one is born into? You could be born into a certain family, certain religious context, certain kind of race, certain kind of features, certain part of the continent, certain part of the world. All of this is environmental karmic reactions, where you're going to be exposed to a certain environment. In some cases, the environment is very complex. In some cases, it is more conducive for the practice of bhakti, for the practice of sadhana. The other part of karma is not so much dependent on the environment, but it is dependent on how someone reacts to the environment and is able to continue with their process. So one is external and the other is internal. Okay? One which is external requires understanding. We cannot really put our head into sand saying that the environment doesn't matter and I will just do what I'm supposed to do internally. There has to be cognizance of the external environment. So one has to learn how to operate. Now, what was the responsibility of the emperor of the world? What was the responsibility of kings in the ages in the past? The main responsibility of a king was to effect the environment in a very powerful way to make it conducive for people to be able to move forward. That was the responsibility of the king. He had to focus on the environment. But there were kings who were so powerful in the past that they not only were able to focus on the environment, they had the ability to arrest the consciousness of the subjects. They were so powerful, they were like sages, where they could practically interfere with the consciousness of people living on that particular tract of land which they were in control. It is seen in the Srimad Bhagavatam specifically, right? Kartavirya Arjuna. It is mentioned in Bhagavatam at that point in time that he was so powerful that he had the ability to affect and practically control the consciousness of his subjects. He had yogic power. Because he had yogic power, he could practically mesmerize and he could hypnotize and he could tell the subjects that you're wrong, you better shift on how you behave. He had the ability to do so. So we notice that the responsibility of the king is to provide an environmental situation which is conducive for the practitioners of the four varnas. Okay? Then comes the definition of what is a king supposed to do? How is he supposed to function? Why is it so important to us? Because this movement, the movement of Lord Chaitanya, is no longer the recluse or the refuge of those who live in temples. It is no longer such. When Srila Prabhupada started the movement 40 years back, it was started in temples. There were a temple environment. People used to distribute books and they used to stay within temples. That was the environment which Srila Prabhupada started with 40 years back. But then today, we are grahasthas. So grahasthas practically are people around the world who are living in different environments which are quite sufficiently complex to the point where it can cause problems in our being able to proceed further if you do not plan. So we have two things to do. Number one, we have to be cognizant of the environment and we have to be cognizant of what we need to do internally. So the bhajan has to be very strong and the strategy has to be very strong as well. Strategy is what you do outside and the bhajan is what you do internal. The internal bhajan has to be very strong and the strategy has to be very effective. Both of these are extraordinarily important while executing Krishna consciousness in the present times. Both of these. So now we understand that Lord Chaitanya himself appeared and he showed himself as Sri Shadbhuja Rupa. He showed himself as Lord Ram, he showed himself as Lord Chaitanya, the practitioner of bhakti, and he also showed himself as Krishna. What does this mean? There is great contextual reference to the Shadbhuja Rupa. It is not simply a matter of inspiring Sri Murari Gupta that you should do this. It was a matter of being able to inspire our entire generations that one requires both kinds of understanding and planning for this mission to move forward. The mission has to move forward after understanding how Lord Ram affected the environment. Understand the part that there is strategy involved in understanding the environment. Because Lord Ram's actions were completely on the external environment. He imposed his rule, he understood what was required, he acted in a certain way, and he accepted certain tenets. And then you also have to understand how to proceed further, which is Lord Chaitanya, to ultimately reach the worship of Krishna. Okay? So you had the Surya Vamshi, Ram, and Surya Vamshis are all about effecting execution. It is all about execution on the external platform. And then Krishna he represents the moon side, Chandra Vamsha, where he is particularly coming forth and talking about the internal state. Right. So both of these are very critical in understanding how we should proceed further. We have to remember that. One, because we are existing in an environment. Number two, there is a need for strategy to manage the environment. You cannot operate in a vacuum. We are not operating in a vacuum. When we started out this movement, most of our preaching was the world is Maya, which is true. But Maya needs action too. If you don't plan and you don't act on Maya effectively, Maya will plan for us and we'll get caught up. So that's where your strategy is important. And number two is the bhajan. The bhajan is what is being addressed in these verses, in this particular chapter. If one does not have an extraordinarily powerful sadhana, then one is not going to be effective either. So both are required. You need to have an understanding of the environment, plan according to the environment and execute, but then internally have the understanding of who we are. Okay? Now, in our process, the process of bhakti starts with first coming in touch with the spiritual master or coming in touch with a powerful soul who is able to inject bhakti into our hearts. Shraddha, faith, is taken from inside the soul, from the person who is giving us Shraddha. He has enormous Shraddha. She has enormous Shraddha. They are able to take their Shraddha and able to imprint upon our consciousness. And when they imprint upon our consciousness, our own heart begins to transform because our heart, which is filled with passion and ignorance, receives the spark of spiritual energy from the potency of a powerful devotee, and then as a consequence, our heart begins to transform. Matter within our heart starts breaking down. Passion and ignorance start breaking down when it comes in touch with spiritual potency. And once we do that, we then begin, right, associating with others. Because we recognize, you see, we are social beings, right? When we say that we have to eat, sleep, mate, and defend. Defending is all about having Sangha. Defending is all about having Sangha. Safety is in Sangha. Defending is all about Sangha. The Sangha that we have is going to protect us. So automatically, because we have social consciousness, because we have desires at a deep level, we start aspiring for associating with those who are aligned with what we want to accomplish. So we come in touch with sadhus. And then after coming in touch with sadhus, we engage in sadhana, bhajana kriya. Okay? Now, where do most devotees get stuck? Most devotees are in the stage of anartha nivritti, which is the next stage. And why are we in that stage of anartha nivritti? Why are we? What is anartha nivritti? Anartha nivritti is simply a matter of the complications of life. Why is life complicated? Anybody? Why is life complicated?
We are choosing that.
Good. Our life is complicated because we desire to make it so. 100 years back, 50 years back, 10 years back, 15 years back, 10, whatever the case may be, before we came into Krishna consciousness, how many of us were chanting or wanting to desire to chant nicely? Practically nothing. What was our culture? Our culture was given by our parents. In India, for instance, or even outside, the culture, which is the environment, they were responding to the environment. They were responding to the environment which was very complex, and they were saying, you have to study very hard, you have to achieve this. So our entire cycle and our strategy and our desires was to become successful materially, and our barometer of success was bigger house, bigger car, more money in the bank. This is the barometer of success wherever you are in the world. You're considered to be successful if you have everything fully arranged for. And by the way, everything nicely arranged for is a requirement. We are not saying that one should be in poverty. We are not saying that one should struggle. Okay? But we did not have any bhajan. We only had this external strategy of wanting certain material opulences because our parents taught us that. By their own example in some cases. In some cases because of the struggles which they had, we observed those struggles and said, we don't want to go through those struggles, we better get our act together. We got our act together and we started proceeding, right? And what did we accomplish? What did we accomplish? We accomplished a situation where we learned how to desire ineffectively. We constantly were desiring just to be able to have opulences because that was a mark of success. We didn't understand what was success. There was no knowledge. We did not understand what is happiness. We did not. Our kids know what is happiness. Because we came into Krishna consciousness, they became happy by hearing kirtan, they became happy by seva, they became happy by having prasadam. Now the kids in our movement, the third generation, are very clear about where is the sense of happiness. We are not. When we started out, we were not. They are very clear. The kids are very clear that, okay, I have figured out what is going to make me happy. All I have to do now is to arrange the external situation to be able to maintain that happiness. So they don't have aspirations like us. They don't have unwanted aspirations. Now if you notice, they are gravitating, saying, I want to be self-sufficient. They are so smart. They are so incredibly smart. And sometimes it just, beats me, saying, I was not thinking like this when I was this age. You see? Our kids are so smart because they're picking up. They're saying, they've understood that, okay, I can become happy by coming in touch with Krishna. They've understood that. By realization. They have had practical realization. We never had any realization when we were younger. We had realization that somehow we have to arrange for the external environment in such a way, and that was happiness. But our kids have realization. This is realized knowledge that they're coming into an environment. They're becoming aware that, oh, I hear kirtan, I eat prasadam, I'm with devotees, I'm happy. They've understood happiness. Now, a kid who has understood happiness, an youngster, someone who has aspirations for the future, who has understood happiness, some part of his or her heart, they are desiring bhajan. Do you realize that? They are desiring bhajan, they are desiring, initiation, they are desiring so many different things in the environment. Why? Because they have understood that there is a source of happiness. Now what happens? When they start aspiring for internal happiness, because they have figured out what they ought to be doing, all they have to do is to plan and educate themselves and get a job in such a manner that this internal happiness business can grow without any hindrance. It's a very, very simple future for children who have come in touch with Krishna consciousness. They have a distinct advantage over us. Srila Prabhupada mentioned this. He said our third generation will take over the world. Why so? They will take over the world because they have figured out how to be happy. And they would affect the environment based on their happiness. They would say, I'm happy, let me just figure out how to maintain this happiness. Their retirement planning is going to begin in 10th grade. Right? Their retirement planning is going to begin in 10th grade. They're not going to be confused like we were about the objectives of life. Because they have realized knowledge. And when I say realized knowledge, I'm not really talking about them having complete sambandha about their connection with Krishna. Complete knowledge of sambandha. I'm talking about a sense of happiness in coming in touch with spirituality. That is realized knowledge too, at different levels. Oh, I'm in kirtan, I'm in the association of devotees. I'm in an environment in front of the deities. I can engage in seva. And all of this constitutes pleasure. This is such an important, profound realization for our second generation, third generation. Now their planning and their desiring is very conducive, it's very powerful. And they will have the ability to practically practically become more efficient in terms of their planning, their desiring, and so on and so forth. So, back to the topic, our own complicated lifestyles is because 15 years back, 20 years back, 20 lifetimes back, million lifetimes back, we never ever had any notion of wanting to be able to engage in bhajan. We never had any notion of wanting to know our eternal connection with Krishna. Our goals were completely off the mark. Our entire planning was how to be successful in this world without having the power to be so. You see, not everybody is going to be on the same level. Right? There's varna, there's ashrama, there's karma, environmental karma, there's internal karma. Not everybody. Everybody has their own little experience in life, which they have to be, come to terms with. So our planning was very poor. Our desiring was very poor in the past. And as a consequence, our present is a bit complicated. Otherwise, why would spending 90 minutes of your time out of 1,440 minutes in a single day be complicated? Why would it be complicated to chant 16 rounds? Why would devotees struggle? Why would we have an environment which is so difficult? It's because we didn't desire bhajan. And what is the job of a preacher who is sitting in the Vyasasana, who is supposed to be giving classes? What is the job of someone who is giving classes? The job of someone who is giving classes is to assist the Sangha in being able to develop proper desires. That is a job. That is the job of a preacher. Because there is karma, environmental karma, there is internal karma, and then there are desires. If desires are overwhelmingly powerful, they have the ability to make way. Krishna can interfere. That's why it's very important for us to recognize that when we come into a class or when we come into an environment of being able to share bhakti, we are looking at several factors. We are not just looking at the practice of Krishna consciousness internally. We are also looking at the complexity of the environment and what needs to be done. How do you handle both? Should be our discussion. How do you handle both? So now let's look at a verse from Bhagavad Gita which practically touches upon the essence of what we spoke now. Okay? This is a very, very important verse, and it's a powerful verse in terms of being able to tell us what to do. This is 9.2 of the Bhagavad Gita. Raja Vidya Rajaguhyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmyam Susukam Kartum Avyayam. Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmyam. Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmyam. Underline that word. What is pratyaksha? Direct perception is pratyaksha through the senses. Okay? And what is dharmyam? What is dharma? Dharma itself is being defined as duty which is performed with knowledge of our eternal nature. Krishna says this. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayasmi masucha. Duty performed after becoming cognizant of our eternal nature. Duty performed which contributes to being able to come closer to Krishna. That is dharma. Krishna says, keep me in the center and then start acting in the external world. By doing so, everything you do is ultimately going to bring you closer to me. Duty performed by keeping Krishna in the center. Please remember that if your strategy is poor in effectively managing the affairs of this world, your bhajan will suffer. Do not underestimate the environment. Do not underestimate the environment. Our business is to be very efficient externally, as if everything depends on us. Please understand this. What is it which we are supposed to do and what is Krishna supposed to do? Be very effective in the external environment as if everything depends on us. Internally, have dependence on Krishna. Saying, yes, I am reacting to the external environment in certain efficient ways. But internally, Krishna, I am completely dependent on you and I will accept all the results of my actions because you are the one who is providing those results. This is the definition of the route for us to be able to chant which is given by Mahaprabhu. What is the verse where Mahaprabhu is giving us the process? What is the verse where Srimad Mahaprabhu is giving us the process? Trinadapi sunichena taroriva sahishnuna amani manadena kirtani sadahari. What is the meaning of this verse in the context of a grahastha who works in New York City? What is the meaning? What is the meaning of this verse in the context of a grahastha who is practicing Krishna consciousness, who is effectively engaging with material nature in ways which are completely contradictory to what is happening inside? Because the world is against the process in many ways, because the arrangements made in the world today are not made by effective kings. You don't have Parikshit Maharaj sitting on top of the world, ruling the world. You don't. Look at the presidential debate which is occurring now. Okay? The last good presidential debate. Jai Shri Shri Radha Shyam Sundar Ki. Okay. So the last presidential debate which occurred in the US, which was clear. The subject matter was clear, the narrative was clear, the dialogue was clear, occurred in 1992, 25 years back. After 1992, it has become so complex that you cannot understand who is talking what. You don't even understand anything when you hear these debates. What is the topic? What is it which is important for the leaders? 1992, they were very clear. We attacked Kuwait we attacked Saddam Hussein because, he invaded Kuwait. It was clear. Okay? It was clear. Okay? Now, nobody knows who is doing what. It's not clear. It's not. After 2008, every business school professor started questioning their own learning, because 2008 proved that the knowledge which they had was faulty. There were many accounts in 2007, 2008 where business school professors started saying, my economic theory, which I was holding dear to my heart, which is 200 years old, which stood the test of time, has now been floundered. It is finished. It doesn't make sense anymore. They are not operating based on the 200-year knowledge now. They are testing. Even today, the US government, European governments are operating on new theoretical basis. They are not operating on old knowledge. Because the old knowledge failed. Remember that. Okay? So it's a complex environment. You do not really have people at the helm, people sitting on top who know what is required even from the basis of material energy. They don't. Forget about spirituality. They don't even know how to efficiently manage material energy. So in such an environment, devotees are functioning. So what is the effectiveness which is required? And Mahaprabhu is giving us the strategy. He was not giving strategy for 15th century. He was giving eternal strategy. He said, Trinadapi sunichena tarori vasaishnuna amani manadena kirtane sadahari. Accept the environment. Tolerance means accepting the environment. Please take note of it. Tolerance means accepting the environment. Okay? Sahishnuna means accepting the environment. Your environment is complex. Accept it. Accept it. How do you accept it? Accept it as if I have arranged for it. That is the way. Saying, Krishna, karmically, my desiring was so wrong that I've landed in New York City, in New Jersey, in 2016. And I'm struggling. But, please, I'm going to accept this environment as if you have arranged for it. And I'm going to struggle and I'm going to tolerate the pangs of suffering which are going to come from being in such an environment. I'm going to accept it. Accept it fully. By accepting the environment as being arranged by Krishna, the environment will become conducive, which is the reason why Mahaprabhu has given that verse. Accept it. Okay? And what is humility? Humility is again accepting the environment. Tolerance and humility go together because you accept the environment. You accept the environment as being given by the Lord. And what do you do after accepting the environment? Do you simply say that Krishna has to do all the heavy lifting? I'm going to just accept the environment? What does accepting the environment mean? Acting upon it effectively. Be very efficient in being able to effectively act upon the environment while understanding that it has been arranged by Krishna. By doing so, one has the ability to constantly think that today I'm in a certain environment, I have a certain complex situation, I have a complex body problem, I have a complex job problem, I have a complex monetary problem, I have a complex relationship problem. All of this is because I did not desire properly. Why would material energy become complex if I desire properly? I had no sense of wanting to do bhajan. So I desired the wrong things. And it mixed up in such a way that, it's a khichdi now, which is very complex. It's very difficult to see which ingredient went in first. Somehow or the other, it's a mess. It's a bit of a mess. So you accept it, saying that this is what I want to do. Krishna, I am accepting this environment. And then I have the humility to accept the environment because you arranged for it. Krishna, I also need the courage. Now the courage is something which we also need to practice. The courage is to be able to act on an environment which we are in effectively, as if it depends on us. So you do all your planning, you do all your consulting, you do everything that you need to do to understand the material environment that you're in so that you're able to act upon it. And then you leave the results to Krishna. That is the fundamental teaching of our scriptures. By doing so, one is able to effectively engage in kirtan. Kirtaniya sadahari. If today's environment is complex, I'm able to operate in the environment. If tomorrow's environment becomes easier, I'm able to operate under that environment. So now what is the translation to this verse? Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyaksha Bhagamam Dharmyam Susukam Kartum Abhyayam. This knowledge is the king of education. It is the king of education. The most secret of all secrets. It is the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion. It is everlasting and it is joyfully performed. I gave you the example of our children. They have direct perception by realization that this knowledge is very important. We gave them knowledge. They may not be able to understand this breakup. But we created an environment where they can come into the environment and very naturally, organically, come in touch with deities, come in touch with prasadam, come in touch with the powerful process, come in touch with the parampara who is very ready to help at all times. And they come and then they develop direct perception by realization that this is wonderful, this is amazing, this knowledge is, this is fantastic. I've come in touch with this environment. Children become very conscious. If you train a child to just honor prasadam, they would be able to very effectively not develop any other desire. Try giving a child who has been trained to just eat prasadam, non-prasadam. They would refuse it. We may not have control, but they would refuse it. Why? Because they've tasted something superior. You see? They don't have any wrong perceptions. They have tasted something superior. As a consequence, they haven't had realization. This is realization, practical implementation. So what does this verse say? 9.2. This verse say that this is the secret of all secrets. Rajaguhyam. It's very confidential. It is very secretive. So now what is this verse telling Arjun? This Arjun's in the instruction which is being given to Arjun is number one. Have proper goals in mind. Okay? The fundamental goal of any religious practice is to reveal our identity in relationship with the Supreme. The fundamental goal of any religious practice is to be able to give us the opportunity to act upon knowledge that we have received of our identity. Who am I in relationship to Krishna? What is my address in Goloka? Am I living in Nandagram? Am I supposed to be living in, Unchagaon or some other place? There are so many different villages in and around Nandagram. Am I supposed to be a Mathuravasi? Where am I? What is my address? Every one of us has a very specific address in the spiritual sky. What is the nature of my identity in the spiritual sky? What is the kind of relationship I have with Krishna predominantly amongst the four mellows of Dasya, right? Five mellows. So Dasya, Sakya, right? Vatsalya and Madhurya. These are four primary, and then there's Shantya, but we are not interested in that. We are more interested in the four primary relationships where the rasa flows. So what is my understanding of my motivation to serve Krishna? Who is Krishna? What is my relation to Him? This is the specific trademark and the beauty of our movement. This is the specific gift of chanting the holy names. So our bhajan should be focused on the strategy of being able to attain this knowledge. This knowledge will come to us when we develop nishtha, becoming fixed. At the stage of being fixed. And when is it that we're going to be fixed? What should have happened before that? Anartha nivritti. Your desires which are non-conducive, non-connected, those desires should have disappeared. And then we become fixed. Then we understand, at that point in time, it's an organic process. Okay? Many of us here are initiated, some are not. But those of us who are initiated have experienced this. When we came into this movement, there was really no planning to get initiated. Where was the planning to get initiated? We heard about it here and there. And then all of a sudden, we find that we develop a certain connection with a soul who is our spiritual master. And then we get initiated. Now, if you actually study this whole process, it is very clear that this entire process is very organic. There was no artificial, machination on our part. It was very organic that we develop an interest, we approach devotees for shelter, and then we receive initiation, we are able to move forward. In a similar manner, when our consciousness develops to such a point where there is no influence of passion, no influence of ignorance, or it is completely minimized to such an extent that it is almost imperceptible, then at that point in time, we start receiving information about our eternal identity from the spiritual sky. And when we start receiving information about our eternal identity from the spiritual sky, we are developing consciousness of our relationship to Krishna. Okay? How many of us struggle to operate as a certain member of an organization wherever we are? Yes, Mataji, but I was talking about struggle in terms of knowing who we are. Okay? You are employed as such and such in a corporation. There is no confusion. You go there and you take on that role and you perform that duty. We are parents of children. So the father, mother. Is there any confusion as to what the relationship is and what duties have to be performed? There is absolutely no imposition. It is done quite naturally because we understand the role. The identity is known, so we start acting upon it. In a similar manner, this verse is telling us, 9.2 in the Bhagavad Gita, that work on your chanting to such an extent that it is revealed to you as to what is your identity. Because that is most confidential. Once you have that internal confidential connection with Krishna, then externally when you start acting on it, there would be no confusion. There would be no confusion. Does it make sense of what we just said? If you know who you are, when you go to work, any of you who are outside, when you go to work, do you forget that you are the father of someone? Or the mother? You don't. You function in two capacities when you go to work. You function in the capacity of being a member of that company, a corporation. You also function as the parents or the husband or the wife of someone. You function in both capacities simultaneously. In a similar fashion, when one develops deep knowledge internally of their connection with Krishna, and the deeper and deeper the sambandha becomes, greater would be their ability to effectively engage in desiring the right things. Our ability to desire is because our sambandha with Krishna is weak. Our sambandha with the world is very strong. We are very clearly able to see that these are our children, this is a wife, this is a house, this is a member of this country, I'm in this country, I'm a member of the corporation. We are able to see that. But the sambandha with Krishna is not clear. So our entire desiring and our planning is based on what is more clearly perceived as opposed to what is hidden. So if we develop very serious attitude of chanting and we develop very serious attitude of wanting to know our eternal address in the spiritual sky, our eternal relationship with Krishna, and once that knowledge starts coming in, it is impossible for you to act normally. Life changes. How many of us are acting normally after coming into Krishna consciousness? Don't we have this perception? Right? We have clear distinction even in the early stages of Krishna consciousness that there is something beyond my 8 hours at work. Now imagine the situation where someone develops deep understanding of the relationship with Krishna. And then they are out there working in a corporation. They're out there doing something which they're supposed to do. Will they forget that internal connection? No. But they will be very effective in desiring. Even if they're outside, even if they're super successful, even if they are the emperor of the world, their knowledge would be that I am servant of Krishna. So now Trinadapi Sunichena becomes a practically implementable plan. Internally, the bhajan would be, "Oh Krishna, I am your servant. All I desire is your service. I have no other desire because in my heart, I know who I am. I have an address. I have a name in the spiritual sky. I know who my parents are. I know who my sister is. I know who my brother is. I know what kind of service I'm supposed to do for you on a daily basis. I am aware of all of that. Okay? And if I'm aware of all of that, can I ever be normal in executing day-to-day duties? No. I would be desiring at all times that I want to jump out of bed, grab the beads and connect. And then I would always be desiring during the day that I must somehow arrange my day in a manner and the future in such a manner that that chanting is going to go on because I'm coming in touch with Krishna. Shuddha Nam. Does it make sense? Our past planning, our past desiring was complex. We didn't know that we would have to chant 16 rounds. We didn't know that the real source of happiness is coming in touch with Krishna. We were desiring to be effective in the world. That was our only desire. We never had Krishna in the center. But the more and more our sambandha increases, the greater and greater would be our ability to desire properly. And when we start desiring properly, the environment will keep changing. The external environment will be changing. You will suddenly find that things are getting easier to do because Krishna is responding to a desire of wanting to chant. And you keep accepting it, saying, "Oh Krishna, this is this external environment. Amazing. I can chant better. I can chant here, I can chant there." My spiritual master, Srila Bhakti Maharaj, he was distributing books in behind the Iron Curtain when the Soviet regime was fully on. You know, when there was the Cold War, during the Cold War. And behind the Iron Curtain, during the Cold War, communist philosophy excluded any kind of spiritual contact. You know, the whole concept of God was considered to be untouchable in the communist regime. It was very difficult for them to introduce that. So book distributors, the servants of Srila Prabhupada, who went behind the Iron Curtain, they faced all kinds of challenges. One, they had to dress in certain costumes. Okay? They had to dress in certain costumes. What was the objective? The objective was to distribute a set of books. They were not really distributing books that were even written. Prabhupada was still writing. And the devotees used to take standing orders wherever they go from the university saying the book is coming. He was writing. And they used to take orders saying, "Okay, the book is coming. Okay, give me orders from the universities." But when they approached the professors in the Soviet bloc, or even in the Western countries, they could not dress normally. So they used to wear wigs, they used to wear suits, they used to wear things, which were allowing them to move forward. Second, for many, many days, devotees were not able to come in touch with a temple environment when they were traveling. You cannot. Many, many days, they will not come in touch with Sangha. Sometimes you're alone. There would be no Sangha whatsoever. Many, many days, they would not have access to books because they can't carry books. Many, many days, they would not have the ability to come before the deities and then, attend the morning program or afternoon program, whatever the case may be. There would be no seva. Okay? And in many, many circumstances, it was so complex that they had to hide even while doing the service because the punishment was death. It was incarceration for life or it was death. Sometimes it was torture. There are so many accounts you can find even on YouTube where there's so much torture. So my spiritual master, Srila Bhakti Maharaj, and many other devotees, he used to travel by train in the Eastern Bloc, in the Soviet Union. And while he traveled by train, what used to happen was the KGB, which was the internal police in the Soviet, they used to be after people like him. So there used to be constant monitoring which goes on in these states. And then he practically used to get into the bathroom, the toilet of the train, lock himself from inside, and people used to bang the door. He used to lock himself up for 8 hours continuously. They used to bang the door, and since he never used to open, they used to think it was broken and they used to just go away. At that point, in the toilet, And the Eastern Bloc, those days, is like being in an Indian train toilet. Okay? Don't imagine that it was, organically designed where they could, biodegradable and whatever. It was not. It was an Indian toilet, okay? Eastern Bloc in the Soviet Russia. 8 hours he used to be in the toilet and all he had was a chanting bag. All he had was a chanting bag. He used to chant, 50, 60 rounds every day while being in the toilet, waiting for an opportunity to slip out of the train and go to the destination that he was to go to. Now, why am I mentioning this? I'm merely mentioning to you that there is so much need for gratitude that our life is so easy in being able to come in touch with Krishna consciousness in such powerful ways where there are no restrictions. There are many parts of this world where devotees do not have the same luxury. Our Trinadapi Sunichena is a matter of waking up in cold weather and going to work and coming back. It's not a big deal. It is not, in the real sense. Okay? There are devotees who could not chant, otherwise they will be put to death. They cannot go and worship in a temple because they're going to be put to death, because there were the circumstances of life. This happened even in our own culture in the 15th century when Aurangzeb was the emperor of Delhi, the Mughal emperor, and he imposed Islam to such an extent that our entire Sangha was scattered during the time of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. There was such complexity in the environment. Now understand, that is a complex environment. What do you do as a practitioner in a complex environment? It is Trinadapi Sunichena, Tarori Vasahishnuna, Amani Manadena, Kirtane Sadahari. You accept the environment as Krishna's arrangement. There's a certain special plan. You accept it. And then you internalize and you start working on being able to effectively increase your bhajan. Externally you do what is practical. Internally you do what is required. The greater our understanding of our sambandha with Krishna, the greater would be our ability to desire a future which is conducive. Lesser the sambandha, worse off we are. So what should we do when we are in the beginning of Krishna consciousness? This is the practical tip. Learn from Shastra that this is a desire. Write down, even if you don't desire it from the heart. I want to chant the pure names. I want to engage in the service of Prabhupada conducively. Write down, I want to have a life which is quite simple, which does not make it so complex that I cannot even think about Krishna, or I find it difficult to chant because there are so many different things that I have to think about. Write that down and read it every day as if it's a prayer. Before you pick up your beads, before you sit for Gayatri, read those set of points that you would like to have for your life to become simpler, because that would allow us to actively manage our desires. Otherwise the desires are there in the head. Okay, I need this, I need that. The senses are going to be attracted to the environment. I need this and I need that. We really do not know if it is conducive or not conducive. But if we reflect on it and then put down proper desires and say, this is what I want, and then you begin chanting, then those desires themselves would manifest, and Krishna would give us an environment which is conducive. Let us start desiring properly now that we have understood, by direct realization we have understood that our happiness lies in coming in touch with Krishna very effectively. We have understood that. Our kids have understood that. So let us start desiring very effectively. Because we made a mess of whatever it is by not desiring 20 years back. Let us start desiring now. We understand that. That is the purpose of coming in touch with Shastra, so that we develop the right desires. Okay? I think I've spoken for almost an hour now. A little less. I will stop here. I will quickly summarize and then we will take some questions if there are any. The most important aspect of both the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhavatam is that it was preached to rulers. It was not preached to an ascetic. The quality of the ruler that was expected was that internally the ruler was supposed to be a fully realized devotee. That is what this verse is. Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam. Learn. This is the king of knowledge. The king of knowledge is not to effectively do things in the material world. King of knowledge is to be effective internally. If you're going to become effective internally and we understand who we are in relationship to Krishna, when our sambandha grows, then we have the opportunity to desire properly. Our present state of karmic reactions, the environment that we are in, is a manifestation of past desires. So why don't we work on future by desiring properly on a daily basis? How do you desire properly? Okay, desiring properly also requires facility. We are not saying that we should eliminate that. If you're desiring a future, desire something which would keep it very simple so that you would be able to chant nicely. How can I wake up without too much worrying, chant nicely? So someone approached me, someone who is from our congregation but who is, graduating. He was graduating and he approached me for, understanding how to do things. He's a very nice child. So I told him very clearly that you start your retirement planning. He said, I'm only 23, Prabhu. I said, yeah. I said, when you come to my age, you will not have any regrets if you start doing it now. Otherwise, you will begin regretting when you come to my age. Okay? I said, start retirement planning. And I told them, start thinking about investing in a shelter. Have a roof, someplace in the States. It doesn't matter. You don't need to buy it in Edison, New Jersey because it's too expensive. You're beginning your career. Look at Texas, look at Florida, get an apartment. Okay, start paying towards it right away with your salary so that you have an apartment. If you can afford it here, so be it. Buy it near a Sangha, an active Sangha, someplace. And then I started telling him, start understanding what you would need to live every day, to maintain that apartment and to meet your expenses in a proper way. So start saving of that amount in whatever way. I said, that's your retirement planning. I said, if you accomplish this by the time you're 35, after 35 you take any kind of risk in the corporate life you want to. There's no issue whatsoever. Because you always have a fallback. You have a net. Do that. Get something basic done so that you have the ability to fall back. And then later on, he found that it was quite prudent. It was very prudent. And he's going to be graduating, he's going to take up a job. He's already looking for places to invest in. An apartment. And I told him that this struggle of trying to do things at the age of 45, trying to do things at the age of 50, is a struggle which you should avoid because you're intelligent. Okay? I said, don't do that. Do it now. Get shelter. So this way, you will go to work without any fear. Because you will know that there's a place to go to if something goes wrong. There is Sangha, there's chanting, there's reading of Bhagavatam, there's Seva, there's Prasadam. What else do you need? Set that up. At the age of 24, set that up so that by the age of 35, you can retire mentally. And then the chanting will be very powerful because you can get very involved in whatever you're doing, the bhajan. And as a consequence, you are able to take risks. You're not going to go to work every day thinking that I could get fired today, I could get fired tomorrow, the economy is going downhill, the economy is going uphill. All these are practical environmental challenges for devotee communities. So start desiring, I told him, write down and start desiring. And I'm requesting that anyone who is listening to this class, if you are planning for the future, plan for simplicity. Plan for an environment where you don't have to worry so much about 10 different things. Does it make sense? Right. This is what our planning should be. Okay? At the very least, after all the experiences, bad ones, good ones, we should at least have some sense that when we are talking to someone, one of our kids, we give them the right advice, saying, okay, we have shown you what is to be happy, now learn how to maintain it. That's it. You don't have to do anything. Right? So we'll stop right here. We'll see if you have any questions. Yes, Prabhu.
Just regarding kids you are telling, right? I agree that if they have consciousness at this stage, maybe like 8 or 10 years, they are out because they are not in Krishna consciousness at this stage. But like, say at the age of 40, right? How do you compare that consciousness or mood of the kid right now, which is going to third generation, to what the consciousness you have in second generation? Why I'm saying is because last month one of my mother was telling her friend the raising doing so many things for these kids, still they show the attitude to the parents, and one mother is saying okay, what happens, what would be our kids in the future, have to stay here and go back, how they going to become, because right now seeing them it seems like difficult. So where we are going wrong.
Okay. Okay, so the question is that right now our kids are at a younger age, so it's observable in terms of what to do and what not to do. But then how do we know that they're going to make the right choices as they grow older and when they reach that particular age? Because, is that what your question was, Prabhu? I'm sorry. I don't know if this is going to be useful so that I can also hear your question. Right. I'm sorry.
I'm saying probably right now they have very good consciousness and the mood, right? Like I'm saying, when we're comparing the second generation and third generations, the second generation people are living a very good life for the third generation kids initially start.
Right.
But when they grow old, like in 40 years, do they have the right consciousness and mood what the second generation people had? Because why I'm saying the second generation people, they are worrying already because still even after giving a lot of spiritual care or whatever, some mothers are parents are still worrying their attitude they are showing, and some are worrying is there going to be an good share or whether we have to stay here or we have to go back from here. There's several people thinking in several ways, even though they have nurtured them very well.
Okay, so the question is that they are seeing challenges even now in terms of manifested challenges, despite the fact that good arrangements are being made by second generation parents in our movement, but there are some challenges being seen in kids despite those, because they're not able to cope with the environmental pressure when they go to school, when they're going to have friends, and the internet. You don't need anything else, you just need the internet, and that's all you need. So the question is, how do we even manage this and how do we even anticipate? Well, here's what it is. We have to perform our duty to the best of our ability. Again, Trinada Pisunichena Tarori Vasaishnuna. Understand what we ought to do as parents, create an environment which is very conducive, give optimum instruction, make as many arrangements as possible to the best of our ability. Ultimately, the child is a soul who is independent and who has to execute his or her own karma. Number two, after all our effort, the results of our effort is again going to be determined by Krishna. But we have complete understanding from scripture that even any little progress on this path can never ever go to waste. It will not. Any progress. So even if we apparently are seeing challenges in children as we raise them, okay, because the children themselves are in a very complex environment and they're coping with many complexities, okay, because they are being stimulated in so many different ways. They look at advertisements, they look at children, they look at peers, there's so much pressure, they look at the internet, they develop desires. The best we could do is to constantly help them to the very best of our ability in providing an environment and opportunity to go further. Okay? And remember this. I'm not being critical, I'm being straightforward. When we were having children, or rather when we were trying to procreate, were we desiring Vaishnavas? Okay, I think I've answered you there. It's a practical consideration. We were not desiring Vaishnavas then, weren't we? We were not, because we ourselves did not know what is Vaishnava all about. We did not know the devotional environment. We didn't. So we were engaging in the typical lack of knowledge ashram of getting married and procreating. But then by the good fortune and by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, we have come in touch with real knowledge. So we are doing our best after coming in touch with real knowledge. We're providing an environment so that these souls who have come into our homes have the ability to move forward. Does it make sense to you as to why there are challenges? It's because we never desired Vaishnavas. We were desiring children. And based on our consciousness and based on the environment we had when we were desiring children, souls came into our home. The environment was not conducive in many cases for an elevated soul to come. In some cases, they came even though because they had to get some knowledge and then they progressed on. So the point which I'm trying to make here is constant desire by parents, no matter what your age is, and our teaching of children to constantly desire to become happy by coming in touch with Krishna, but to facilitate the process by being effective in the world. That should be our communication to our children. We should constantly imprint on them the fact that you cannot plan for happiness in the world. You plan for happiness by coming in touch with Krishna. But be effective in being able to arrange facilities so that you can engage in sadhana. That should be our communication. And ultimately, children are also going to pick up from what they see from us. Ultimately, the children are going to pick up what they see from us. They're not going to get any external, out of the blue knowledge. They're going to observe their parents and see, have you effectively been able to, internalize the instructions given in Shastra? Have you been able to execute? They're going to observe that and ultimately they're going to act on it because everybody is looking for siksha. The siksha of children is from the parents. Any other question? Yes, Prabhu. It's a very good question. How do you know if you get married, so you want to say that start planning? That's why you desire to serve Krishna at all times. So even when you get married or you stay single, what are you going to do? You constantly desire of wanting to serve Krishna. So if you get married, you serve Krishna. So if it is good, you serve Krishna. Similarly, when we want to have children and children are coming into our house, we desire that they are devotees so that we could serve them and we could give them an environment. So that way, Krishna would make arrangements for nice souls to come in like yourself. How old are you? Yeah, he's already worried about marriage. He's already worried about marriage, which is not wrong, because you see in the Srimad Bhavatam, in the 4th canto, the Prachetas were asked by their king, Prachinabhari, their father, go and get married and start ruling. The first thing, the moment they heard marriage, they said, let me go to the forest. Let me go to the forest and engage in deep bhajan so that I will develop strength and internal connection, after which I can get married. They understood what marriage was, the Prachetas. You see? They understood. So it's a good question. It's good for you to start thinking that yes, we have to plan. If you're very Krishna conscious, then you will have a very nice Krishna conscious family. Okay? Any other question? Okay, so we'll stop here. Srila Prabhupada ki.